So I'm Mike Finney. I'm here with the Miami-Dade Beacon Council. So we serve the economic development work here in Miami-Dade. And so I'm curious about the outcomes that have been delivered on all of this. Certainly, you provided some with respect to Drexel. Very impressive in terms of what you've done in the procurement area. But on a more global scale, a lot of work over an extended period of time. I'm just curious what kind of outcomes are being delivered, because much of what you described was, here is what's out there, here's the potential, here's what all these institutions represent. And I'm just curious if any of that's being boiled down to actual outcomes in terms of jobs and reductions in poverty, reductions in recidivism rates of ex-offenders, and so on and so forth.
Well, I can say from our perspective that just at the Dornsife Center, that one center in the community, in the last 3 years, over 240 residents have gotten jobs. 26% of our procurement is MB procurement. 12% of our professional staff are now from West Philadelphia. We're not thinking that we're going to change the poverty rate in West Philadelphia. So in fact, our goals are not that global. But in terms of producing immediate wealth, the amount of money that's going back into the neighborhood, we've been able to quantify that in a number of different areas. We also have really seen residents who've come to us improve their reading levels, get high school diplomas, and advance in many ways, and we've been able to track that too.
And I'd say in Cleveland, where I've worked most on the ground because I live there, it's been a similar story. We've had Cleveland State University doing a longitudinal evaluation over the last 5 years. I think it's the 6th year now of this effort that's called the Grady University Circle Initiative, this multi-anchor strategy. I don't have the figures at the top of my head, but we have created over the last number of years, the institutions, when they aggregate it all, something north of 800 jobs. Many of them within the institutions held by local residents that have good career ladders. We've charted how much taxes to the local, general fund, the individuals who now have jobs are paying, as well as these evergreen companies or for-profit, how much they're paying for the, potholes to be fixed in the school system and all that. We also are tracking data in the community in general about safety issues, poverty levels, and all that. And we're not yet seeing those kind of changes in the neighborhood. What I would say is the neighborhoods we're looking at have been on a decline for 50 years. Back in 1966 and 1967, there were what we used to call in those days race riots, and what the people in those neighborhoods now talk about the Huff Rebellion. Huff is one of the neighborhoods where I live, the Glenville Rebellion, where the National Guard came in and police, and a lot of people shot it. And that started a 50-year decline. And so this, I think Steve Marcus talked about this. This strategy is a sort of system-changing strategy that starts to make some clear payoffs now. Some people are having jobs, but it's a rebuilding over time in these neighborhoods.
I was curious about the 30 anchor institutions that you described nationally, if there's any data.
Yeah, not yet. I think a lot of them are, this is early days, they're moving into this. There's lots of anecdotal, in Toledo, ProMedica, the hospital there, realized that one of the things that was bringing people to their emergency room for treatment all the time is there's a total food desert. There's no, local food of any kind. So they invested in opening a grocery store, full-service grocery store that the hospital owns in the neighborhood, that sort of thing. But we are going to start to evaluate that. A lot of these anchor strategies are still pretty new. So I think that we're going to look over the next 5-10 years, see what's developed.
Yeah. Hi, so since we're in Cleveland, can you tell us about the micro, or the enterprises that, I don't know if they're micro really, that you started in the neighborhoods that are supporting the hospital, they're supporting this initiative, where you're trying, if I understood correctly, build equity in that for the employees? How's that going? What have you found? Just tell us about that.
Yeah. So We started on the purchasing side in Cleveland. It was one of the first things we did is we realized that the three major anchor partners were purchasing $3 billion, that's what the B, dollars of goods and services every year, and yet they're surrounded by this sea of disinvestment. So money was clearly not going in the neighborhoods. And so there are a number of strategies. One is universities, hospitals change their procurement guidelines, how they tender an RFP for a contract, so that winning bidders not only are price competitive, but agree to come into specific neighborhoods and build a facility there where the work will be done and hire locally. One thing we looked at was where are there gaps in the market where anchor institutions are looking to buy something and there are no local vendors that are supplying it. And that's what we used as the genesis for a startup business development strategy to create community-based employee-owned companies linked to the supply chain of the institutions. We currently have 3 businesses. They each have about 50 people working in them. A very high percentage of them are ex-offenders. They have the barriers to employment. Lucy talked about low educational attainment and so forth. People were unemployed before we hired them. 2 of the companies are extremely profitable right now, and the 3rd is about to turn that corner in this coming year. We have one is called the Evergreen Cooperative Laundry. It does about 8 million, 10 million pounds of bed linen for hospitals and so forth. That one's very profitable. We just had a profit sharing event earlier this year where the workers who've been there the longest received checks of about $5,000 each as part of their bonus. And when you live in a community where the median household income is $18,500, $5,000 is a big amount of money. We have a renewable energy company called Evergreen Energy Solutions that receives contracts from the Cleveland Clinic, for instance, to come in and take out all of the old style lighting in their parking garages and install LED lighting, which cuts the cost to the institution and provides a great flow of work. That one's profitable. And we have a food production hydroponic greenhouse in downtown Cleveland that's 3¼ acres under glass, so it's a big facility growing 3 million heads of lettuce and 300,000 pounds of basil for the local food market because of Cleveland's growing. There's a blizzard in Cleveland today, by the way, so I'm glad I came yesterday. If you're eating lettuce any time of the year except August, that lettuce is not coming from Northeast Ohio. It's coming from Mexico or Chicago or Arizona. So we have 3 companies underway. We have some very interesting deals that are about to happen. We think the employment base in 2018 will double, so we'll be up to 300 employees. And so it's just one part of the model, but it's been very rewarding for people to. I think one of the things that you find in neighborhoods that have really been disinvested is people have a sort of ceiling on their expectations about what can be achieved in life. And as one of the people we hired in the laundry told me, I said, why is this, what's the opportunity for you having this job? And I thought he'd say, well, I've got some money in my pocket. I can feed my family, I've got a job. He didn't say that. He said, I never thought a person, he'd been incarcerated twice. He said, I never thought a person like me would have the opportunity to own a share of a major company like this. And I think that's life-altering in terms of perception, what's available to people.
I like the fact that you asked him, because all you hear on TV is people saying what they think people think, but you simply asked him, he told you.
Yeah. The other thing about these jobs, we intentionally created these companies to be the greenest in their sector, not because it's morally right, and it is, but as a business proposition because the anchors are trying to green their supply chain. So he said, do business with our laundry. Our competitors use 4 gallons of water for every pound of bed linen they clean for you. We use 0.8 gallons. We'll give you a report card at the end of the year about what a good environmental citizen you are. And I asked one of their workers, what do you think about this green company? And the myth is sort of people that live in low-income neighborhoods don't really care about climate change and green, and that's sort of for people that are better off or saying. He said, I started hearing about the green economy, so I went to a library because I don't have a computer, but I went to a library and I started Googling and searching, And what I found led me to believe that I was going to have to leave Cleveland and move to Portland, Oregon, if I wanted to participate. So he said that I'm an owner of the greenest commercial laundry in the state of Ohio. That's very cool, I think.
So we have 2 more questions, unless someone else raises their hand, and then we'll move on to the next commission.
Well, for me, this is a dream come true. 15 years ago when I met Ted, he had me at hello, and I think you can see why.
We both had coal black hair.
Yeah. And I know you're a bicyclist or something. I saw you in DC one time on a bicycle. That was another random fruiting, as they say. But I like the way in which it's described as so many of these strategies interfacing and being part of a more integral approach. And I want to mention something and then ask you something. Immigrants, regardless of legal status, regardless of status, can own shares in companies, whereas they can't get permission to work. So this was one of the things that really intrigued me about the legacy business idea, which is how we're calling it now, legacy business. We have other ways of calling it, but basically those companies that then can be given over to the workers for shared ownership and then profit sharing and the like. And so that's something very relevant to our community that I think we definitely want to explore. And in the farming community, which is the second driver of our economy in Miami-Dade, we have, the average age of farmers is in the 60s and very few young people coming along wanting to go into farming, but those who know how to farm are the workers, and what a great opportunity that is. And I know, some of us have been talking about that as a future economic opportunity, and tapping my Beacon Council guy right here about that. What I want to ask you about is the interface with the government procurement side, because Miami-Dade County has a very robust local business preference, local hiring and the like. The school board also, which by the way makes me think if you haven't included the public school system.
Lisa's here.
Yay, oh
And
Lisa.
there's Mary from Broward, correct?
Okay, oh, all
And
right.
Danielle.
Okay, see, I was only saying good things about you, and I didn't even know you were in the room.
Lisa's here.
Yeah, because, really set a really good standard. So how can we sort of interlace those things? I'm sure there are things that we could do better at the county, but we can certainly leverage the impact by working across public and private sector. So that's a question, sort of.
Yeah, well,
Statement, question.
Yeah, I really agree with that. Most of the institutions we tend to work with at the Democracy Collaborative are, private institutions like the Cleveland Clinic. And, at the end of the day, the CEO of the Cleveland Clinic and their, C-suite leadership can kind of do whatever they want as long as their board agrees. They could, purchase in any way they want. The public sector is always more challenging because there are always all kinds of regulations and constraints and all that. I've been really heartened by the work we're doing in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Sorry.
It's for the video. I think we all hear, right? Yes?
You can hear, right? We're projecting. You're good? But in Albuquerque, New Mexico, because you've got these private institutions like Presbyterian Health, and then you've got a number of publics. University of New Mexico Health Sciences Center is part of the state school system. We've got the public school system and the mayor's office, all working together on how do we localize this economic activity. And so it's been really interesting to see how the city, for instance, is changing its regulations and ways that can empower this whole strategy. And just one thing to say, for those of you, sometimes I think you hear this kind of stuff we're talking about and you go, well, this is kind of liberal democratic stuff. That's kind of good, but I don't know how this plays in Alabama. I don't know how anything plays in Alabama these days. But the mayor of Albuquerque is a quite conservative Republican. And this just makes sense to him, that we need to harness our resources. So I think what Lucy and I are talking about, one of the things that excites me is at least at the local level, this has the opportunity to bridge that kind of traditional right-left or red-blue thing. From the more liberal, it's kind of doing good for people and it's addressing poverty and it's opportunity for immigrants and all that. But from the conservative perspective, this is development that uses our own local assets. We're not waiting for the federal government to create some big program to come in and tell us what to do. It's bootstrapping operation. With the Evergreen Cooperatives in Cleveland, I did the feasibility study to see would this work, and then the Cleveland Foundation asked me to present it to their board, and so I did, because they were looking to make an investment, $2 million to get this started. And the board is interesting because half of the board are pastors from the community and folks that I just thought, well, they're naturally going to love this, because it's their parishioners, they're getting jobs. And then half are very conservative business people and self-identify. They say that, I'm a conservative businessman. And when I did the presentation, I thought, how is this going to work? You're talking about worker-owned companies, hiring ex-felons, they're going to be green. I mean, is this guy just going to think I'm a socialist? What is he going to think? And the first person that responded to my presentation when I was done was the most conservative business person on the Cleveland Foundation board. And I steeled myself. Okay, here it comes. And he said, I've been on this board for years. I have been waiting for years for something like this to come here. Because the people that are going to be in these companies, they're going to own them, they're not going to be working for the man. They're going to own a share of the business. So the level of accountability is going to be way higher than if you're an employee. And we're going to use some of our philanthropic seed capital to start for-profit businesses, and they're going to stand on their own, and they're not going to keep coming back year after year for more money, and they're going to pay taxes to the city. And so there's something about this, I think, that can really bring together people in a really creative way. If nothing else, when I go to places, I talk to chambers of commerce. I say, look, you've got a poverty rate in your city of 30%. You all are local small business people. That means 1 out of every 3 people in this community doesn't have enough purchasing power really to buy from you. So it's in your self-interest to get involved in all this, because it's truly going to be better for you. And I think that argument's persuasive.
So one more question, and then we'll go on to
Denise, I just would like to thank you for the invitation. It's great to be here, and thank you for the 2 presentations. When I listen to your talk, it is very aspirational, very stimulating, and the social aspects and what you're trying to achieve is laudable, and I think this is where we have to go. However, the question is how do we get this done? And I happen to be in a similar situation where we're building a new medical school up in Nova Southeastern, and I wanted to pick up on Michael's question about data, which I think is incredibly important to articulate where are you and where do you want to go and what's in between. And I believe that as a communication strategy, even to this audience, a kind of type of logic model where you assess, hey, where are we now today? What is our targeted intervention and what are the outcomes that we have might actually help tremendously to be very specific as to what we want to engage in poverty, in drug addiction, and in target issues. Where are the biggest problems here in South Florida? And when I ask that question, we come to sometimes different conclusions than what's going on in Miami-Dade because we live in Broward. It's pretty much interconnected, but for us as a medical school, we have to set priorities, and I think everybody does, in order to develop the resources in order to achieve the outcomes. So I just would like to refocus the discussion in a more data-oriented way, and I would like to thank my partner in crime, Mike, who's providing us with the data to get that established.
So Samira and Todd, and if you like, you can either stay there or go back. But again, we want to have a conversation.